Burnaby Village Museum and UBC's Asian, Canadian, and Asian Migration Studies have partnered for 5 years to host student projects at the museum. Each student group was given the goal of creating visitor experiences based on community-engaged historical research. Student projects concentrated on presenting Burnaby's culturally diverse history to the public and are part of a wider museum goal for greater inclusion throughout the 10-acre site. I do find that as a museum, it's a very special place because the visitors are so integral to how the experiences are made. When we opened in 1971, it began very much as a BC small town, so not rooted in Burnaby. It was in Burnaby, but it wasn't about Burnaby. And the city, the municipality of Burnaby, took over in 1989. It became the mission and the mandate of the museum to collect and preserve and present the history of Burnaby. But it's also to connect stories of cultures. So using Burnaby as a tool to talk about other cultures, other communities as access points so that everyone from any walk of life from all over the world could really get something out of this experience, but learn from what Burnaby used to be like and continues to be today. So the partnership between Burnaby Village Museum and UBC's ACAM, the Asian, Canadian, and Asian Migration Studies, began in 2018. We've had a lot of projects that focus on Chinese Canadian history. So to have these projects take new stories and new identities, new culture groups, and to put them on the site at the forefront of what we do, it has a lot of compelling intersections with the public. So anytime the students have engaged with the public, it brings out new ideas and new stories that really help with the diversification of our audience.
My first project at BVM was in 2019. What we did was we researched 3 Chinese Canadian industries in Burnaby: piggeries, restaurants, and laundries. Then we basically turned our research into art panels. We also held tours for visitors, and I would say meeting visitors was really memorable for me because I made connections with the visitors who went on the tours. I actually still have their contact, and they actually just messaged me a week ago saying like, oh, they're coming back to Vancouver to visit or whatnot. I used to think that this work was only intended for like academics or like people who really cared about Chinese Canadian history, but through these tours and you meet people from all over the place and you learn from them as much as they learn from you as well, because they would tell you Chinese Canadian stories from where they came from.
My project partner, Stephanie Johnson, and we worked on a few different projects related to the market garden at BVM. So one part was called the Story Harvest Station, where we invited visitors to the museum to just write a little index card of a food story or a gardening story or their migration story. And it's just a conversation piece to get them sharing about themselves and maybe their connection to the museum or their connection to the Lower Mainland or BC. And we could also learn about the farming history in Burnaby, particularly in Big Bend, and how that connects back with some of the early Chinese migrants who brought farming practices, growing practices here from southern China, and how their contributions made such a big impact on the local food system here and fed multitudes literally in this region.
We all eat. We all like to eat. We like to cook. And swapping things out between the cultures is always a good way to make some cultural communities meld a bit better. We also have one particular garden here that's called the Market Garden. It expanded people's idea of food and also tried to bridge the cultural gap between one type of society and another. And I think that's one of the major things about museums. It keeps a history of your society so that you can connect to different parts of it.
Because it's a community, so you can talk about a community's history in a space that feels like a community. And a lot of what visitors get is through their interactions with each other. So I think that Market Garden exhibition was really an opportunity to hear from visitors in that space, what they thought about the space, what their memories, again, that sort of sensual experience. A garden, you think about food and sharing food with family and what a dish smells like and all of those kinds of experiences you have in a place like that, and it really evokes memory.
And these types of conversation starters that start with food oftentimes can lead to a lot of deep sharing about experiences of what it means to be living in Canada, living in Burnaby, and also thinking about the importance of cultural transmission and heritage and aspects of identity. And so in 2019, we opened the Across the Pacific exhibition, where we had connected with a number of Chinese Canadian farm families. Many of the visitors that have come through the exhibit have been providing very positive feedback, commenting on the fact that they finally feel they are being represented at the museum and that it's important to recognize the diversity of Burnaby's history. And the Burnaby Village Museum provides an ideal space for presenting these stories to the public.
We were focused on the Chinese herbalist shop. At that time, from an education perspective, but also just from an engagement perspective, the space wasn't being used to its full capacity. So there was no real interpreter that was positioned in the space. So for us, we decided to really consider how herbalist shops function, not as an artifact or some sort of part of history, but how it kind of connects with communities today. I think from my perspective, being able to engage with the public in such a meaningful way was a way to learn more about my own culture and also share about it. That was really important aspect of our project.
Now we always have someone in the Chinese herbal shop because it's an important story that needs to be told. So it's so important that staff be in there every day so that when someone comes in, we can talk about the social history, the cultural history, families, exclusion of families. We can talk about what the Chinese actually did rather than what the government were doing to the Chinese community. And from that, where previously it was just a Chinese herbal shop, now it has evolved into a community hub for the Chinese community.
当然可以讲中文，我们有很多旅客进来，他有一些人是白人，有一些人是华人，而且有一些华人也不会讲中文，但是有一些华人也不会讲英文。如果只有英文的牌子，虽然他懂这个文化，但他也不能解释给他的家庭，他只能解释一部分，所以就有一些洞在他的解释里面。然后呢，我可以讲中文，所以呢，他也感觉比较安心，也比较欢迎。就是我觉得是最重要的是他感觉很欢迎，可以进来，然后呢看东西也可以问，所以有英文字幕 也有中文字幕加上去，我觉得是很棒的一个东西，会让他们感觉像他们有被考虑到呀。
我也很想感谢我的外婆，我是学生的时候，在我们做项目的时候，我们很想要有一些中文的翻译。就是在那个 story card 的部分来介绍一些不同的历史的故事啊，不同在菜园里面长的蔬菜，那我们就翻成中文。那因为我的中文不是100%太好，所以我就请我外婆帮我看一遍中文字幕有没有什么错别字啊，有没有什么错的地方要改。有更多关于华人、关于亚洲人在 Burnaby 的历史的生活，我觉得非常好，因为 Burnaby 也有很多亚裔的人住在那里当家，所以我觉得是一个很棒的机会，可以跟这群我们社区里的一些家庭来形成连接，来聆听他们的故事，也跟他们建立关系。
So when I started working here like 13 years ago, there was no diversity. There was no inclusion. We were telling the usual white settler colonial story. There was not much thought given to other voices of Chinese community, the South Asian community, and that's why with this space opening up now, we have many families that come in. They come in and their eyes just light up. They see their reflection, their stories, their faces, their cultural items. They recognize, hey, this is my story. This is my community story.
It's a bit of a pride aspect because when you grow up here, like I think a lot of children have a hard time reconciling their hyphenated identity. I definitely did as a kid, and I think that is a result of not having our stories told, because I think a lot of the narrative around early Chinese Canadians in BC is like from a point of view of victimization almost, where it focuses a lot on the discriminatory side, the barriers and the challenges that they faced. We kind of took the project in a way that highlighted how resilient the communities were and how innovative they were in overcoming some of these. And I think like decolonization is a two-way street. Like we need to focus on the systemic side, making structural changes and addressing the root cause.
And we're really supportive of the work that the city is doing in terms of decolonizing the heritage of Burnaby, decolonizing the museum space, and being able to reflect the true diverse roots of Burnaby's history. What happens with the work we do at Burnaby Village Museum is that not only does it transform the experiences of the community in terms of them recognizing the importance of their own lived experiences and their family histories in the broader storytelling of what Burnaby is and who it is, but also I believe that it's been a transformative experience for a lot of our students as well who have been through these programs.
I think not only do you learn a lot through the process because you're actually doing your own research, but I would say a lot of it was self-motivated. Like you have to take initiative, you decide what you want to do with the project. They give you a lot of room to be creative as well. Through that, you're learning by doing, which isn't something you get to do in school a lot. And when you are talking to visitors or like the people who are actually going to be exposed to your research and project, you realize that more people care about this stuff than you thought. And yeah, I would say that's one of the most transformative things.
We had 4 or 5 or 6 students at BVM basically every year for 4 years, and our students became really a part of what they were doing year after year. Even though the students changed, I think that relationship over time was really crucial. I think one of the lessons for me and for others about effective and impactful community engaged research and learning is to have a long-term relationship, to have short-term and long-term goals. And I think that's the kind of best practice and kind of an ethical way of making sure that it's good for the students, it's good for Burnaby Village Museum, it's good for UBC and its mission to really make BC society better.
I would love to see this partnership continue. I think it's a great way for students' work to be acknowledged and affirmed and seen by the community in a very powerful way. I'm really grateful for just the freedom and trust they gave us to dream up a project and to implement our ideas, but also shared their experience and expertise with us about what it is to create museum programming and to engage with visitors in a meaningful way. I think these experiences really give students an opportunity to bridge who they are and bridge kind of what they're learning academically as well, and offer that to the community.
The city really supports us. They see how it is important to connect with the community, and not just one type of community, all types of communities, so that everybody is welcome here, and that you should be able to see a bit of yourself in all parts of the museum. I think we have to celebrate what we have done, but also see what we could do in another 50 years. Like what do we see Burnaby BVM in another 50 years? And can we connect to more people, and so that they all have the experience that they deserve?